Eric Kendricks to the 49ers. These are deals that were done on day 3. The 49ers got better at linebacker, and they did that with the former, I believe, first-round pick by the Minnesota Vikings back in the day, all pro. You like the move, as Harry points out in the rundown, possible Band-Aid with Dre Greenlaw injuring his Achilles. It was Achilles, not ACL, right? Achilles, God, on the sideline of the freaking Super Bowl that they lost because the defense sort of kind of collapsed after that.
That was it felt like that was like kind of the watershed moment. They were a little emotional. I thought a little bit too much in that to begin that Super Bowl. They were jumping around, going a little bit too crazy for my liking. And that was kind of the crowning example. He gets a little too excited, blows out his Achilles, and kind of everything cascaded from there. I like you're saying, I think this is just insurance until he's fully ready to go, because an Achilles in the last game of the year in the Super Bowl, that's not the quickest turnaround time to be ready for camp, week 1, first month of the season. Who knows?
Right. And when you have someone like Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins coming back from Achilles, obviously they need their feet to be able to move around, but a linebacker's got to be able to move in every direction. So it probably will take a little bit longer for him to come back from Achilles injury. I don't think you do know when he's going to come back. So yeah, I think you guys are absolutely right on this, that it does just feel like an insurance signing, and that Kendricks will probably end up starting the season, because I don't think Greenlaw will be ready for week 1 or week 2, maybe even the first month. But it's crazy to think also that Eric Kendricks, this is going to be his 10th season in the NFL. He's literally been in the league for a decade. And he was a second-round pick, Brinson. I think you mentioned first-round pick.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was all right. Well, some of those guys,
there's
a bunch of those defensive players on that Mike Zimmer team were first-round picks. Maybe he was second-round pick. My bad. Morgan Moses, also a second-round pick, I think. Traded, I'm pretty sure he's a second-round pick. Traded to the Jets along with pick 134. The Ravens get pick 112 and 218. And the Ravens, who just announced Derrick Henry signing, also restructured Ronnie Stanley, so they didn't have to cut him. And that's a good thing, because if they did, they'd have one offensive lineman. The Ravens offensive line, it's usually a stout unit. It is actually, I think, pretty thin right now. We have Ronnie Stanley, Malese Alumeve-Luua, Tyler Linderbaum, who's their 2022 first-round pick. You feel good about him, et cetera. But then, they got Ben Cleveland and Daniel Falalala, so you're talking about a bunch of guys who are, mid-round picks that they hope can develop. That's not great when you're the best running team in the league. Like if the development of the picks works out, great. But right now it feels like Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum, the only really higher end guys on that offensive line.
Yeah, you're putting a lot of blind faith in Derrick Henry just plowing over whoever it is, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, look,
I sort of trust the Ravens, but
they've been pretty consistent, and getting rid of everyone though seems like, think of like you're negotiating with Derrick Henry, like, hey, Derrick, we know you didn't have a good offensive line in Tennessee the last 2 years. Don't worry, we got everything figured out. 48 hours, Derrick's looking at the roster like, wait, what happened to our left guard and our right tackle and our right guard, and why are we trading Morgan Moses? So I do think it is a little weird, because hope is not a great strategy at any position, but definitely not on the offensive line. You don't want to go into the season hoping that these guys are going to turn out and be productive. But from the Jets standpoint, I love this, because, you have Aaron Rodgers come back. You have to protect him at all costs. And I've been told I'll be banned from the podcast forever if I mention that he might not play for the Jets this year and might take another job. So I won't mention it. But
what job would that be?
You have to get offensive line help for Aaron Rodgers. So this, I do like the trade from the Jets standpoint.
Yeah, you go from if you're Aaron Rodgers, you're looking at an offensive line last year. I know that the quarterback position was god awful, but the offensive line certainly didn't help. I think they gave up like 64 sacks, which was the third most in the league. You're a dude that's, not going to, is he 40 exactly, or however old he is? He's an old man in NFL terms. He's coming off a blown Achilles. Yeah, I would look at other opportunities possibly if I knew that was my offensive line outside of this Moses trade. So, solidify that. You feel a little bit better about the Jets. You feel a little bit better about Rodgers' comeback abilities.
You're saying you might run to an office job.
What? Maybe.
It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
He's going to be the MVP.
Have you seen this?
But the VP letters don't stand for.
Aaron Rodgers wins MVP. What would the M be for in that spot?
Mr.
Moron. All right, moving on. The 49ers got Malik Collins. The Texans get a 7th round pick back. That feels pretty generous for a decent player. I think we might see a lot of this. It'd be interesting to see how much of this we get, where sort of the intermingling, the incestuous nature of the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree is wide as it spread. How much of how much swapping back and forth and movement of these players will we see? And you get it here with Malik Collins traded for a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this when we were talking about the Jonathan Grenard signing. You always be a little bit weary when a defensive-minded head coach is just okay with getting rid of players and also giving them like a sweetheart deal to his former team. I don't know. That one all the way around kind of was a little bit fishy to me. One, for just like gifting him to his former team, but also, again, when it's a defensive-minded head coach, always be a little bit weary when he's more than happy to just let another one of his players go walking out the door, or in this case, shipping him out the door.
Since the defensive-minded head coach used to coach for the 49ers, maybe it's a little, hey, you know what? Here's a little bit of help. I didn't know what I was going to do with Malik Collins this way. So here's a sweetheart deal. And you look at the 49ers are doing, I mean, their defensive line is going to be totally revamped this upcoming season, where Chase Young's probably going to leave. We already saw, I think, Cleveland Farrell signed somewhere, Javon Kinlaw. They just cut Eric Armstead as soon as the new league year started. So they're having a lot of turnaround. We've seen them already make some moves in free agency with Leonard Floyd and Gross Matos. Jordan Elliott. So this is, I think, the 4th defensive lineman that they've kind of added. So look, you've got to do something at 49ers. You got to have people on the field to play defensive line. And I don't think that at this rate, getting him for a 7th round pick seems like a good deal.
Do we think that Kyle Shanahan is like totally he's just like annoyed at his defense and annoyed at Steve Wilkes? He's just like sort of moving it out, or just, maybe sort of like just like cap construction too. I think you look at this defensive line though. I mean, Javon Hargrave, he signed for a monster deal last year. Obviously, he's a stud, and then Nick Bosa is incredible. And then you have enough depth there where you can kind of rotate guys in. Leonard Floyd, a nice little supplemental pass rusher. He always seems to do well in these 1-year deals. So, I don't know. Pretty good revamping of the defensive line, even though, you think about just a few years ago, you had Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner, and you're thinking like, my God, this team is stacked for years. Jimmy Garoppolo, Brian Hoyer, Jerry Tillery, and Hunter Renfrow all officially released by the Raiders. Just axing those old Patriots quarterbacks. Matt Collins to the Buffalo Bills. Basically, hey, Mac, speedster. It's okay in Carolina. Drink. He's had some decent like moments where he's just a vertical guy, and this is essentially like filling the role that Gabe Davis vacated by leaving, right?
Yeah, I actually am a little concerned about the Buffalo Bills offense right now. I think that Dalton Kincaid is going to make a big jump, and he's going to be that, I think, quasi number 2 receiver or target pass catcher, whatever you want to call it. But boy, if Stephon Diggs was having trouble last year when there were jokes that he wasn't even double covered at certain points during the season and had lack of chemistry with Josh Allen, and they just really struggled down the stretch, what's going to happen now that Gabe Davis is out, and then you insert Matt Collins, who I think is going to get even less respect from the opposing secondary? I just think that this is a recipe for Stephon Diggs and that saga to add a little bit more uneasiness as we go forward, because I just think all of these secondaries are going to continue to focus on him.
Yeah, I do think if you're the Bills, though, and I mostly agree with you just said, Tyler, but if you're the Bills, I think you're thinking, all right, this is his upside, is that he has never played with a quarterback who was even remotely as good as Josh Allen. If you look at where he's been, Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke last year, Derek Carr and Jarrett Stidham in a Josh McDaniels offense. And then when he was with the Dolphins, that was before Mike McDaniel was there. So you're in Tua when Tua hated himself and hated Brian Flores and hated that offense. And it's hard to function in that offense when nobody knows what they're doing. So it doesn't seem like he's played ever in like a super competent offense. And as Tyler said, that's where the Bills might be headed. They might not be a great offense, but maybe they're thinking, you know what, Matt Collins could be a home run threat for us because that's what we need right now. And we think Josh Allen can get him 40 or 50 receptions a year.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen, as I mentioned earlier, is not shied away from still throwing the YOLO balls. And if you look at Mac Hollins' yards per target, like, I mean, the last, he has, when he's played full time, like Philadelphia, when he, was an actual, out there on some snaps, 10.3 yards per target. When he gets to Miami, 7, 8, 7.3, 8.4 in Atlanta last year. I mean, it's a guy who's, bounced around, but certainly has that vertical threat. Let's talk about Danielle Hunter to the Texans. 2 years. I saw this come across the wire, 2 years, $48 million. That's a big chunk of change, but I like the fit and D'Amico Ryan's defense. I mean, this is a guy that's, was super productive in Minnesota and continued that trend afterwards.
I mean, it's essentially that they traded Danielle Hunter for Jonathan Grenard, right? One went to the Vikings, the other one went to the Texans. So I'll ask you guys this: if that was a trade, who won that trade?
The Texans.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just think that's we were critical of it for the Minnesota Vikings a couple of days ago. It's kind of you downgraded if you were Minnesota. I think you upgraded here if you're the Houston Texans. And the Texans, I think, are having a phenomenal free agency period, phenomenal offseason so far. So this is just another feather in their cap as we go forward.
Look at Tyler foreshadowing into the podcast. What, Brinson?
Yeah. Why did I think that the Danielle Hunter played somewhere other than Minnesota last year? I don't know why.
Because
he was in
Minnesota.
He spent an entire year trying to get out of Minnesota.
Yeah, I guess that's why. Had his actual highest sack total last year and led the league in tackles for loss. Made the Pro Bowl. Was in the comeback player of the year mix the year before, even though he got injured. 10.5 sacks and then 16.5 sacks plus 22 quarterback hits. He's been around for a long time, but he's one of those guys where he's not 30 yet. He has played 8 seasons because he was drafted when he was 21. There's some of these guys where Tyron Smith, formerly the Cowboys, where these guys have been around forever. And it's true. Danielle Hunter has been around forever. He was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2015 draft. He's played a bunch, but he's still not even 30 years old. And so if you're Houston, you're getting a potentially very productive pass rusher. I agree that the upside here and the stability is better there than it is with Grenard.